Chapter 926. After dealing with the documents, Li Huaqing stood up from his desk. Just as he was about to eat something and rest, his secretary, Ma Si, knocked on his office door. Li Huaqing smiled at him and said, "That's all for today. Time to get off work." Ma Si also nodded with a smile and whispered, "I just received a call from Minister Dongcheng." Madame Li Shi woke up. Li Huaqing, who was already thinking about what to eat, paused for a moment and sat back at his desk. "Is Li Shi awake?" Murmuring to himself, he subconsciously tapped the table with his fingers. He was deep in thought. The sanatorium of the giant group was extremely closed. If there was no killing intent in such a place, there was no need to infiltrate his own people. Any invincible realm expert was the core combat capability in any country, and it could even be said to be the core trump card. No matter what Li Shi's identity was, her strength at the peak of the invincible realm was there. No one said anything when she was in a coma. But once she woke up, the sanatorium would definitely report it to its superior immediately, and finally, it would be conveyed to him. It should have been a few hours ago. Ma Si lowered her voice and said in a complicated tone, "Li Tianlan didn't hide his whereabouts. He came directly to Yuzhou from Huading and entered the sanatorium. He should have come to see Li Shi. But at that time, the news of Li Shi didn't come out, so we didn't know what he was doing in Yuzhou." Li Huaqing remained silent. In just a few hours, the news that Li Tianlan had killed the killer of the invincible realm with one blow in Huading had quickly spread throughout the dark world. First, Gu Qianxuan, then Zhu. The two invincible realm experts were both killed by Li Tianlan with one blow. Li Tianlan was completely building his reputation as the East Emperor with bloody military exploits. When the news came out, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing called him. Li Huaqing didn't answer it as he couldn't see the undercurrent aroused by this news for the time being. However, according to the report of a director of Wuxia, Wang Qinglei had already arrived at Yuzhou province the moment he received the news. At this moment, the entire dark world must have fallen into chaos. 13th floor. Dong Huang, Xianyuan Feng, Li Tianlan, no matter what it was, no matter what the outside world thought of him, he was proving one thing to the outside world. There was no solution. Li Tianlan was at a loss. In this current era, he was truly an invincible existence. The death of Gu Qianxuan and Li Zhu might not fully explain this, but Beihai, which was on the verge of breaking out, was destined to be the stage where Li Tianlan really ascended to the throne. At times like this, Li Huaqing sighed and whispered, "What can he say to Li Shi when he comes to Yuzhou? Let her join Emperor Dong's palace?" Ma Si thought for a moment and said, "In the past 2 years, Emperor Dong's palace and Kunlun City's attitude toward Li Shi has been very strange. Moreover, when she was in Mormons, she stood with Li Guangtu and Lin Fengting. I think no matter what His Highness Gu Xingyun ordered her, he would not give her such an order. It's very interesting that after the end of Mormons, I collected information about Kunlun City. All kinds of signs show that in that chaos, Kunlun City sent not only Li Shi to Snow Country, but also a quite elite team of experts. But from the beginning to the end of the chaos, the elite team of Kunlun City did not appear. Only Li Shi appeared, and she stood with Li Guangtu. Li Shi has been in a coma in the sanatorium for more than 2 years. Kunlun City doesn't care about her and doesn't even want to take her back. On the contrary, Emperor Dong's palace is doing its best to treat her, which seems a little strange." "You mean," Li Huaqing said lightly, "Li Shi betrayed Kunlun City?" "This is the most reasonable explanation." Ma Si said seriously, "It's difficult for an invincible realm expert to be completely in our sight. Even Li Tianlan, the commander-in-chief at that time, we can't fully know what they did. Maybe before the chaos began, he and Li Shi had already met and reached some deals, or maybe there are other possibilities." As soon as Li Shi woke up, Li Tianlan rushed over as soon as possible, which is enough to explain the problem. At least it shows that Li Tianlan is very sure to let Li Shi join Emperor Dong's palace. It makes sense. Li Huaqing nodded and smiled, feeling a little strange. He said, "Why not the purgatory of heaven capital?" Ma Si's expression froze slightly, and she said hesitantly, it shouldn't be possible. In fact, we don't need to guess too much. Let's call the young His Majesty and ask him directly. Li Huaqing laughed. That's right. Ma Si smiled and took out her mobile phone. The mobile phone vibrated. Almost at the same time, the ringing sound came from Ma Si's and Li Huaqing's mobile phones. That was a message push. People at their level naturally wouldn't pay attention to two boring things. All the things that could be pushed to their mobile phones were basically important events. What's that? Li Huaqing said, took the mobile phone, and was a little surprised. Celestial phenomenon? Meteor? What's that? A colorful flowing light appeared in the sky over Yuzhou. Strange celestial phenomenon suspected to be an extraterrestrial meteorite. Looking at the somewhat inexplicable title, Li Huaqing and Ma Si opened the special push software at the same time. A short article and a short video appeared on the screen, which seemed to be reprinted from other media. In the video, an incomparably brilliant light appeared in the sky almost in an instant. The light crossed the night and disappeared in an instant. For a moment, Li Huaqing understood the meaning of the word "suspected" in quotation marks. Almost everyone could see that the ray of light had risen from the surface of the earth to the sky and disappeared in an instant. Number 32 Qinghe Road. Ma Si finished watching the video and read the article. It was clearly written that the light first rose from near number 32 Qinghe Road. His body stiffened, and he looked up at Li Huaqing. The sanatorium. Number 32 Qinghe Road was the address of the sanatorium of the giant group. What? Li Huaqing's tone was a little slow. That light is probably Li Tianlan, Ma Si swallowed, and his tone was a little difficult. Are you kidding me? Li Huaqing said subconsciously. That light was Li Tianlan. This statement was just like telling a fairy tale. Li Huaqing could accept the sword light that went from the central plains through Yanzhou, Dongshan, Yuzhou, Longjiang to Beihai, and then through Suzhou to the desert of Beijiang. Because it was a living murderous weapon. No matter how powerful it was, there would always be a time when its energy was exhausted. But Li Tianlan was a living body of flesh and blood. How could he reach this level? Wang Tianzong of Mormons, Ma Si whispered. He set off from Reki City, crossed all the terrains, and appeared in Mormons. Li Tianlan can't reach that level, but he has Xianyuan Feng. Maybe. And the location is too coincidental. Li Tianlan came as soon as Li Shi woke up. This light appeared from the sanatorium and went directly to the northwest. His voice stopped abruptly. All the speculation was meaningless. The most important thing was that the light suspected of Li Tianlan went to the northwest. That was the most terrifying fact. Ma Si glanced at Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing's voice suddenly rose. Call him. The phone was quickly dialed. Ma Si waited for a while, looked at Li Huaqing, and shook his head. I can't get through. As soon as Li Shi woke up, the light went to the northwest and went to Kunlun City. Li Huaqing's brain was confused for a moment, and he made a prompt decision. Call the Prime Minister and inform him of the news. In addition, contact Minister Dongqing Wudi. He was willing to remain neutral now, but it didn't mean that he could let Li Tianlan do whatever he wanted. After all, Gu Xingyun was the god of war of Zhongzhou State and the governor of Kunlun City. In any case, nothing could happen to Gu Xingyun. That was the minimum bottom line. Kunlun City. In the exquisite courtyard that belonged solely to the city lord, the sound of something shattering rang out incessantly. Gu Xingyun listened to the news brought to him by Chen Fengqin patiently. Li Shi woke up. He suspected that Li Tianlan's sword light was already on the way to Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun didn't know what he was thinking in his mind, nor did he know what he had responded. Gu Xingyun trembled all over, and his blood pressure kept rising. With monstrous anger and resentment, he directly smashed the phone against the wall as soon as he hung up the phone. The surging power kept sweeping in the room. Gu Xingyun smashed almost everything that could be smashed in the room. Some high-level officials of Kunlun City rushed over as soon as possible, but they were driven out mercilessly by Gu Xingyun. His eyes were red, and he gritted his teeth. Standing in the ruins, he kept cursing, "Bitch! Bitch! How dare you betray me? How dare you betray me? Damn it, bitch, bitch!" With a heavy gasp, his voice echoed in the room like thunder. His expression was ferocious, and he almost completely lost his mind. He liked Li Shi. He liked her, and he still liked her now. He was very sure of that. That was the only woman he had ever loved in his life. He dreamed of being in harmony with her and growing old with her. Even after knowing that Li Shi had given birth to a child for Li Guangtu, he was still willing and wanted to forgive and accept her. He really thought so in his heart. So after the treason case, Gu Xingyun married Li Shi at the first time. But it was not the grand wedding he dreamed of. That wedding was low-key and simple. At that time, Gu Xingyun did not realize what he was avoiding. His married life with Li Shi was simple. At the very beginning, Gu Xingyun felt the ecstasy of regaining what he had lost. But there were also times when the emotions were strong and intense. He soon noticed Li Shi's numbness and the sadness that seemed to penetrate into her bones. For her own fate, and also for Li Guangtu. Gu Xingyun was very angry, but he was also very disappointed. He suppressed the anger in his heart and talked with Li Shi again and again. There was no improvement at all. Li Shi's breath became more and more numb, and she was like a walking corpse all day long. He really liked Li Shi, so he tried to give her some psychological hints. He used this trick to get a lot of information about the Li family, and he also wanted to use this trick to make Li Shi loyal to him. But hypnosis was not omnipotent, not to mention that Li Shi was already in the invincible realm at that time, and her strength was stronger than Gu Xingyun's. His hypnosis had no effect. Gu Xingyun wishfully thought that this was the reason why Li Shi valued Li Guangtu too much. The real situation might be like this. But Gu Xingyun, who was blinded by jealousy, did not think about anything at all. He had seen Li Guangtu and Li Shi under the moonlight many times, watching the two figures snuggling up to each other, watching Li Shi's belly slowly grow bigger, and watching her happy smile grow more and more. Strong jealousy and unwillingness almost distorted his soul. In fact, he felt inferior in his heart. He was not as good as Li Guangtu, far worse. He knew this, but he was unwilling to admit it. He always thought that as long as Li Guangtu died, Li Shi would be his. But what he got was a walking corpse. It was unclear how it started. When he slapped Li Shi's white and tender face for the first time, everything could no longer be reversed. At that time, he caught Xianxia and ordered Li Shi to take off her clothes. Then, in front of Xianxia, he completed the so-called wedding night. Gu Xingyun's heart became more and more distorted, and all his dark thoughts seemed to burst out at that moment. He tortured Li Shi, insulted her, beat her, and scolded her. The next day, looking at her bruised body, he apologized gently, hoping that she could forgive him. But Li Shi never changed. Thus, he became even more irascible, and his attacks became heavier and heavier. He poisoned Xianxia. After Li Qingqing spoke, he poisoned his daughter. He used all his means to tie Li Shi to his side. Gu Xingyun no longer cared about her heart. He even gradually forgot his own feelings. Seeing Li Shi, he could only. His first thought was to torture her, to keep her by his side, to torture her for the rest of her life. Even if he died, he wanted this woman to be buried with him. Xianxia and Li Qingqing needed him to give them temporary antidotes every once in a while. But Xianxia hadn't looked for him for a long time. So Gu Xingyun knew that Xianxia had most likely fallen in some corner. There was one less trump card that restricted Li Shi. In fact, Gu Xingyun had already had a hunch in his heart. After hearing everything about Mormons, he already had some guesses. Now, after more than 2 years of sleep, she woke up. But she did not return to Kunlun City. She was the first to see Li Tianlan. Then, Li Tianlan came to Kunlun City. It was not until this moment that Gu Xingyun finally realized that so many years of entanglement and torture seemed to have come to an end. He seemed to be really going to lose Li Shi. Completely lose her. So he fell into an unprecedented state of rage. Li Tianlan. He muttered to himself, Li Tianlan, do you think I will be afraid? You want him to kill me? Come on, do you think I will be afraid? If I die, your daughter can't live. No one can King live. Go to hell, all of you. He murmured and suddenly turned around. The huge power condensed for a moment. The exquisite courtyard belonging to the city lord was knocked open by Gu Xingyun in an instant. The wall cracked, and the stones flew. He rushed out of the courtyard and came to another stand-alone courtyard. In the courtyard, a beautiful young woman in a red dress was standing at the door, seemingly hesitating. Seeing Gu Xingyun suddenly appear, she was slightly stunned, and then asked cautiously, Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. Gu Xingyun's voice was cold, and he looked at Li Qingqing in front of him. Are you going out? Where do you want to go? Why, Kunlun City can't tolerate you. Li Qingqing's face was a little pale. She looked at Gu Xingyun and could not speak. Get into your room. Gu Xingyun's voice was cold and vicious. Without my permission, you are not allowed to step out of the room. Li Qingqing looked at him speechlessly, a little confused and a little innocent. Gu Xingyun suddenly raised his hand. Slap. He leaned forward and slapped Li Qingqing hard in the face. Li Qingqing's body was directly whipped up, broke the window, fell into her room, and passed out on the spot. Gu Xingyun's expression was complicated. He took a step forward subconsciously, with some pity, some apology, some madness, some ferocity, and countless expressions constantly intertwined on his face. He seemed to want to go in and see his daughter, but finally stood there and sneered. His figure flickered and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he had appeared in front of the gate of Kunlun City. The night was dark, and the sky was full of flying snow. In the flying snow, he sat in front of the city gate, looking in the direction of Yuzhou with a cold expression. As long as Li Tianlan dared to come. He had already made up his mind. As long as Li Tianlan dared to come, he would kill Li Tianlan here at all costs. The wind was cold, and the snow was cold. He sat there, waiting silently, like a statue. The night deepened, turning pitch black, and becoming silent. The deep darkness slowly passed. The faint light lit up little by little in the flying snow. Dawn was coming. A stream of light suddenly lit up in the distant sky. The rainbow-colored light seemed to carry with it endless light. Dawn broke in the sky. At the moment when day and night alternated, the extremely distant sword light suddenly appeared in front of Gu Xingyun. It was unparalleled brilliance and sharpness. It was high and dazzling. The light pulled a long rainbow that tore the sky 10,000 meters away. The colorful light shone. At dawn, a rainbow as long as 10,000 meters suddenly appeared in front of the snowy Kunlun City. Everyone who saw this scene froze in place and stared blankly at the phenomenon that seemed to have surpassed the power of nature. The rainbow drew an arc in the air, extended toward Kunlun City, and finally landed in front of the gate of Kunlun City. The colorful sword light was stable and bright, like a bridge. Surrounded by endless light, Li Tianlan stood on the rainbow, like a god. He looked at Gu Xingyun sitting on the gate tower with cold and majestic eyes. Gu Xingyun raised his head and looked at him with indifferent and cruel eyes. Gu Xingyun. Li Tianlan spoke faintly. His voice instantly swept the whole Kunlun City with the wind and snow, echoing on the snow-capped peak. Li Tianlan, Gu Xingyun laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes, only endless viciousness and killing intent. What are you doing here? I want a person from you. Li Tianlan said faintly. Gu Xingyun was stunned for a moment. He thought that she asked Li Tianlan to kill him, but he didn't expect that she just wanted a person. Me? He asked back, suppressed the complex emotions in his heart, and said indifferently, Who do you want? Li Qingqing. His voice was neither high nor low, but it echoed throughout the city. At this moment, standing on the rainbow, he had almost completely integrated with the endless snow-capped peak. Gu Xingyan suddenly fell silent. At this moment, he completely understood Li Shi's plan, and he suddenly laughed. You want Qingqing? Is it possible? Dream on. You're dreaming. Are you still dreaming? You want Qingqing with just you? Impossible. I'll give you 10 minutes. The rainbow in the distance seemed to slowly converge toward Li Tianlan in the sky. Li Tianlan was expressionless. After 10 minutes, if I don't see her, I'll go in and find her myself. How dare you? Gu Xingyan suddenly got up, and his powerful aura soared instantly. In front of the gate of Kunlun City, countless guards rushed over subconsciously, lined up, and looked nervously at Li Tianlan in the air. Li Tianlan's voice was calm and indifferent, without any leeway. Those who stand in my way will die. Chapter 927. It's coming, it's coming. It was finally here. Gu Xingyan raised his head and stared at Li Tianlan in the air. The violent agitation in his heart made him numb all over. For a moment, he could not speak or even make the slightest movement. He had already anticipated this day. From the moment Li Tianlan killed Gu Qianxuan with one strike, or from the moment Li Tianlan killed Gu Qianxuan with one strike, or even earlier, when Li Tianlan became the combat capability of the invincible realm, he seemed to have expected this day. He had always been on guard. But in recent years, Kunlun City had been a little weak. Li Tianlan, who was shining like the sun, had been rising rapidly and dazzlingly. Gu Xingyan knew that he would attack Kunlun City sooner or later. But he didn't expect it to be so fast. In the snowy morning, he floated in the air with the 10,000-meter-long rainbow. In front of him was Kunlun City. It was the hub of the special warfare system of Jianghu State. He was the war god of Jianghu State. He said, "Those who stand in my way will die." Gu Xingyan's body trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of indescribable resentment and anger. He came to Kunlun City in a crushing manner. If he really took Li Qingqing away, it almost meant the official decline of Kunlun City. It also meant that Emperor Dong's palace would be above Kunlun City. Gu Xingyan's eyes turned scarlet. At that time, he carefully flattered the Li family and let his most beloved woman go to Li Guangtu's side. She even gave birth to a child for him. He made countless promises and invited a large number of helpers. He overthrew the Li family and took advantage of the situation. In the first few years when the foundation of Kunlun City was not stable, in order to consolidate its position, the elites of Kunlun City went all out to prove their position of defending Jianghu State after replacing the Li family. At the same time, they showed a smiling face to the people inside, especially to the prince group. During that period, they could even be said to be the vassal of the prince group. It was not easy for them to gain a foothold. What they next faced was the internal questioning and review of the treason case in Jianghu State. What could Gu Xingyan do? Fighting, continuous fighting. The newly established special warfare group spared no effort to cleanse the Li family's forces. They used all kinds of means and owed countless favors both internally and externally. The power of the Li family was constantly being purged and dropped to the lowest point. They began to hide. The Wang family of Beihai also completed the shuffle of the southeast group with the help of the clarity of Kunlun City. But the good times had yet to come. Good days. Or F** King didn't come. Next, they would face the Wang family of Beihai and the southeast group. The Wang family of Beihai seemed to be greatly weakened after losing the Li family, a staunch ally. But after losing the balance, Mount Dibing became more and more unscrupulous. They fully demonstrated the foundation of the first wealthy family in Jianghu State and even the first wealthy family in the Dark World. In those years, under the suppression of the Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City could not even breathe. Because they were suppressed to the point where it was difficult for them to even survive. The aggressiveness of the Wang family of Beihai finally caused uneasiness in the parliament. The higher-ups began to step forward to coordinate the relationship between Kunlun City and Beihai. But without the Li family, Kunlun City could not keep Beihai in check. Some people were also a little dissatisfied with Kunlun City. In those years, Kunlun City also behaved with its tail between its legs. After constant coordination and multiple negotiations, a fragile balance was finally reached. Kunlun City carefully developed its power in Jianghu state. When it encountered the Wang family of Beihai, it gave way. When it encountered the Prince group, it gave way. When it encountered the academics, it gave way. The constant concessions finally allowed the Special Warfare Group to accumulate some assets in a sullen state. But before Gu Xingyun could breathe a sigh of relief, Li Tianlan F** King appeared again. Then there was the Samsara Palace. He was seriously injured after losing the final battle with the master of Samsara Palace. In the final battle of Heaven Capital, Li Tianlan turned the tide and saved the loss of Zhongzhou state. The appearance of the purgatory of Heaven Capital completely stimulated the nerves of Kunlun City. Then, there was the chaotic war that lasted for 3 years in the Dark World. All the superpowers were in a mess, and he was also involved in Zhongzhou state. In Lin'an, he was seriously injured by Situ Tsangyue with the setting sun. The chaos was chaotic. Finally, with the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, countless chaos in Snow Country completely turned into a detonated chaos. At this time, Li Tianlan came back. Very good, very powerful. The combat capability of the Invincible Realm, the perfect sword intent, the future chosen one, the marshal of the Snowdance Corps, Gu Xingyun was really angry at that time. He wanted Li Shi to kill Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu in Snow Country. Li Shi directly betrayed him. Gu Xingyun simply ignored it and slowly healed his injuries. He wanted to become an expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm in the new era and continue to rush forward with Kunlun City. He had not recovered from his injuries. Emperor Dong's palace rose, and Li Tianlan became his majesty. Then he came over and stood in front of Kunlun City, saying that those who stood in his way would die. Counting the past 20 years, Gu Xingyun suddenly found that he had overthrown the Li family and established Kunlun City. But for more than 20 years, under the appearance of high spirits, he had hardly lived a day of real comfort. Retreat, compromise, exchange, bow his head, all this was not even for them to make profits, but to gain a foothold. Now Kunlun City had really gained a foothold in Zhongzhou state. However, they had met the enemy that they wanted to get rid of the most and most wanted to get rid of. What could they do? Retreat? Compromise? Gu Xingyun straightened his body little by little. There was no room for retreat and compromise. If they retreated again this time, what would be left of the entire Kunlun City? They would return to the days when they were subordinate to others more than 20 years ago. What was the point of these years of grievance? Do you dare to kill me? Gu Xingyun stared at Li Tianlan and asked word by word. I don't dare. Li Tianlan's tone was ordinary, and this sentence was not convincing at all. But I want to go in. Do you dare to refuse? This is Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun's voice was heavy and bloody. Why don't I dare? Li Tianlan looked down at his watch. His eyes slowly moved away from Gu Xingyun and swept over the guards of Kunlun City. All the guards were tense when his eyes swept over them, but no one put down their weapons. Li Tianlan remained motionless. 3 minutes left. He only gave Kunlun City 10 minutes. All the blood in Gu Xingyun's body seemed to pour into his brain. His voice was hoarse and ferocious. Li Tianlan, don't go too far. 2 minutes. Li Tianlan said lightly. I can't give my daughter to you. She's my daughter, mine. Gu Xingyun roared wildly. Li Tianlan waited quietly. Time passed second by second. The morning light was getting brighter and brighter. 10 seconds. He suddenly spoke. The 10,000-meter-long rainbow in the distance had completely shrunk. His whole body was wrapped in colorful light, and his expression was blurred. 5 seconds. In the extremely oppressive atmosphere, countless people turned pale and subconsciously grasped the weapons in their hands. Some experts of the fire-flaming realm and the thunder-shocking realm of Kunlun City rushed over one after another. 3. In the light, Li Tianlan's voice was calm. 2. His steady and cold voice was without any bravado. He raised his hand in the light. The extremely rich colorful light condensed again in his hand. In the suffocating silence, the voice seemed extremely abrupt and cruel in heaven and earth. 1. Go to hell. He gathered all his strength. Gu Xingyun roared furiously in an instant. 10 skills of true martial arts, 10th unique domain. The bright morning light turned into night in an instant. Gu Xingyun's body became twisted in the dark for a moment. All the injuries were forcefully suppressed. After a few minutes of preparation and adjustment, his aura kept rising in an extremely crazy manner, rising again and again, as if it would never end. The domain of the invincible realm, which was countless times thicker and more solid than that of Gu Qianchuan and Absolute, surged and spread. It was extremely quiet and dark. In an instant, the dark domain surrounded all the guards in front of the Kunlun city gate and protected them. The domain continued to spread. In the darkness, there was no longer a desperate vacuum. In the shortest amount of time, everywhere the domain passed, there was an astonishingly swift and fierce storm. This was Gu Xingyun's strongest power and his strongest domain. It was no exaggeration to say that at this moment, Gu Xingyun was in the best state he had ever been. After more than 2 years of silence, the peak of the invincible realm was already clearly visible in front of him. Although the injuries in his body had not yet healed, at this time, when he went all out, he was already better than himself more than 2 years ago. Gu Xingyun's eyes were cold, and he took a step forward in the domain. This was his domain, his home field. Between steps, his figure instantly crossed a distance of dozens of meters. In the dark domain, there were silent storms everywhere. It was all his sword energy and power. The sword energy all over the sky tore the dancing wind and snow, tore the snow-capped peaks between the mountains, and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. The next moment, Gu Xingyun's expression suddenly froze for a moment. In his sight, Li Tianlan was standing there. The colorful light around him looked more and more dazzling in the dark domain, so dazzling that it was even a little fake. But everyone could see that he was there, so real. But countless sword energy storms could not lock Li Tianlan's body at all. The domain roared and spread over. The moment it encountered Li Tianlan, it seemed to encounter an obstacle that needed to be avoided. He floated steadily in the dark void, and everything around him was not affected by the domain at all. The locking of the domain seemed to be completely ineffective against Li Tianlan. How was this possible? The bright light slowly flowed along Li Tianlan's arm and condensed little by little. Li Tianlan reappeared in Gu Xingyun's sight. But his existence became more and more illusory. Not to mention the sword energy storm in the domain. Now if Gu Xingyun closed his eyes, he could not even feel Li Tianlan's existence. The light condensed into a point in his palm. In the shining color, the luster became pure. You always seem to be unable to recognize the situation. Li Tianlan said quietly, but I like Kunlun City's resistance very much. This is the excuse I need. Gu Xingyun's heart sank for no reason, and he said coldly, you'd better know what you're doing, Li Tianlan. Don't forget what Kunlun City means to Jianghu State. Even if you die here today, it doesn't matter. Li Tianlan said lightly, it may have been important before, but now Jianghu State belongs to Emperor Dong's palace. You always can't recognize the situation, but now I can tell you that my country doesn't need the so-called nation-protecting war god. In the shining luster in his hand, his raised palm suddenly stopped. At that moment, Gu Xingyun seemed to feel great danger. He suddenly roared and appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. He waved his fist. The thick and solid domain suddenly became twisted and violent. Li Tianlan's raised palm stretched forward. The rainbow-colored radiance had completely disappeared. His fingertips were already as red as blood. Chapter 928. Li Tianlan's movements were simple and casual. In the domain of the 10 skills of true martial arts, he stretched out his palm, neither fast nor slow, and it looked extremely clear. When he closed his fingers like a sword, he lightly tapped on Gu Xingyun's fist at the most appropriate time. The condensed scarlet luster bloomed in his fingers in an instant. It was the extremely condensed sword energy and killing intent, with the purest destruction and death. The fist and the finger separated. The expressionless Gu Xingyun's body seemed to move. In the silent domain, the sounds of collisions rang out like rain. Fast. Almost no one could see clearly what had happened. In most people's eyes, Gu Xingyun and Li Tianlan moved almost at the same time, but they had collided several times. The silent and dark domain still enveloped Li Tianlan steadily. Gu Xingyun, who seemed to have never moved, stood where he was, and his face had become extremely solemn. Streaks of blood flowed out from his sleeves, dripping down one by one. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, and his aura became more and more dangerous. Stop now, go back to Tiannan or Yuzhou, and I can pretend that nothing happened today. Gu Xingyun's expression was solemn and cold. His words were tough, but in fact, he took a step back. In the short fight just now, Gu Xingyun thought that he had figured out Li Tianlan's strength, and Li Tianlan should have known his recovery state. Both of them had a vague understanding of each other, so some things could be discussed. In fact, even if Li Tianlan couldn't take Li Qingqing away today, he could still get a lot of reputation by fighting with Gu Xingyun in front of the gate of Kunlun City and retreating. The influence of this matter might not be much less than that of him killing an invincible realm killer with one strike. Are you done? Li Tianlan said slowly. His face was pale, and he stood there, but the aura under his body became more and more ethereal. In fact, I've always been curious about your strength. Everyone says that you are the invincible realm closest to the peak of the invincible realm. I don't know if you have made progress in the past few years, but from the strength you just showed, you are still not good enough. Li Tianlan laughed. If you are finished, Gu Xingyun suddenly retreated. His domain was his home field. As long as he fought within his domain, he was not afraid of the real peak of the invincible realm. In an instant, Gu Xingyun's body was like a phantom, retreating dozens of meters in the blink of an eye. However, a red light appeared in front of him. A dazzling blood-red color occupied his vision. Li Tianlan swung his fist and punched him hard in the face. It's my turn to play. A light voice sounded, and Li Tianlan's body appeared in front of Gu Xingyun. A huge power that could almost pierce through steel landed on Gu Xingyun's face. At the moment when his body leaned back, a fierce knee hit directly on his abdomen. His internal organs seemed to be torn at the same time. It was an instinctive reaction. Gu Xingyun leaned back and suddenly moved forward, bending his waist subconsciously. Elbow, uppercut, leg sweep, the storm of attacks fell on Gu Xingyun in an instant. Li Tianlan's strength was not strong, and he did not even carry much killing intent, but the endless attacks covered Gu Xingyun in an instant. Gu Xingyun retreated. Li Tianlan advanced. His figure was extremely fast, and it seemed that he was really not affected by Gu Xingyun's domain. In Gu Xingyun's suppressed and violent roar, his body was quickly suppressed to the gate of Kunlun City. Behind him were a large number of guards and experts of Kunlun City. In Li Tianlan's current state, it was not difficult for him to kill them than to eat and drink. Really, there was no way back. There was no way back. Then he would fight to the death. You're courting death. Gu Xingyun's body suddenly stopped in place. In an instant, countless attacks landed on various parts of his body. Gu Xingyun's body lit up, and his aura became stronger than ever. Li Tianlan's eyes condensed for a moment. In the shortest time, Gu Xingyun put his palms together. With him as the center, another darker and deeper domain directly enveloped Li Tianlan. Ninth secluded impasse. He still couldn't lock on Li Tianlan, but the second domain isolated the elites of Kunlun City, so he didn't need to lock on. Are you serious? Li Tianlan chuckled. Gu Xingyun's face was cold and gloomy, and he opened his hands without saying a word. The silent darkness suddenly rioted. The space was completely distorted in a shape visible to the naked eye. The whole domain was distorted, and the frenzied airflow surrounded Li Tianlan. The space began to collapse and shrink with him as the center. The frenzied airflow was like the sharpest blade, constantly slashing and tearing around him. The huge pulling force caused his body to clearly sway. His face was getting paler, but his eyes were getting crazier and crazier. He could clearly feel Gu Xinyan's state. From the moment the ninth secluded impasse appeared, Gu Xinyan's combat capability, whose aura had already reached the peak, increased again. Now he was at the real peak of the invincible realm. This was no longer a force, but an outburst similar to overdraft. To some extent, Gu Xingyan was destroying his future martial arts foundation in order to improve his strength. In this state, Gu Xingyan really reached the peak of the invincible realm, but there was no possibility for him to make any further progress in his life. Even if he could recover from his injury in the future, he would at most be at the peak of the invincible realm, and he would still be the weakest in the peak of the invincible realm. Not to mention Wang Tianzong and Lin Fengting before the breakthrough, he might not even be able to defeat Arceus in the crown state at the peak of the invincible realm, let alone Wang Tianzong and Lin Fengting before the breakthrough. Gu Xingyan had endured for more than 2 years. This was definitely not the price that he was willing to pay. But now that he had come to this point, the only thing he could do was to fight desperately. The violent power was stirring wildly around Gu Xingyan. Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyan's eyes. Gu Xingyan's eyes were already blood-red, showing a kind of determination and violence that almost lost his mind. This was interesting. No matter what was wrong with Gu Xingyan's mentality, he had a certain possibility to break through the peak of the invincible realm. Both his talent and his performance in the past 2 years could prove this. If he was just at the peak of the invincible realm, it was not worth Gu Xingyan's hiding for more than 2 years. Especially during the 2 years when Emperor Dong's palace rose rapidly, Kunlun City could really stay still. Such forbearance also showed that what Gu Xingyan wanted was not just a peak of the invincible realm. Obviously, he had a certain degree of confidence to attack the current realm of Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu. Li Tianlan was forcing him to cut off his own way forward. Even if he had firmly believed that he was invincible in the world, an enemy at the level of Li Guangtu was still a huge trouble for him. Every more such enemy was a variable. Li Tianlan would not hesitate to cut off Gu Xingyan's martial arts and limit him to the peak of the invincible realm. Since he could do it, Li Tianlan would not hesitate at all. Not to mention what would happen in the future, even now, he was not afraid of a weak man at the peak of the invincible realm. He couldn't kill Gu Xingyan. He couldn't, and he didn't dare to. Gu Xingyan himself knew this. Although the state-protecting god of war of Jianghu state had no clear rank, in the eyes of others, he had always been at the same level as the directors of Jianghu state. He was also the face of Jianghu state in the dark world and a symbolic figure in many foreign affairs of Jianghu state. It was not difficult to kill Gu Xingyan, but if he really died in Li Tianlan's hands, it was not only a slap in the face of the parliament, but also a slap in the face of the parliament. Li Tianlan couldn't do such a thing. Even Wang Tianzong and the Wang family of Beihai had only suppressed the development of Kunlun City for so many years. This bottom line was much more serious than killing the whole Qi family. It could be said that whoever touched this bottom line would die. But Gu Xingyan still had a reason to fight desperately. Li Tianlan didn't dare to kill him, but it didn't mean that he couldn't deal with the whole Kunlun City. He didn't even need to kill anyone. If Gu Xingyan didn't take action, with Li Tianlan's ability, he could turn Kunlun City into ruins in the shortest time. He took in the first master of Kunlun City, the wife of the governor of Kunlun City. Then he destroyed everything in Kunlun City in front of Gu Xingyan, took away Gu Xingyan's daughter, and left. If all this happened, Kunlun City would become the laughingstock of the whole dark world. The higher-ups would certainly vent their anger on Li Tianlan, but they would definitely reconsider Gu Xingyan's identity. What kind of god of war was a Jianghu state god of war whose wife and children were robbed and whose base camp was demolished? In this way, the image of Kunlun City as a stable special warfare center in Jianghu state would be shattered at once. At that time, no one would stop Li Tianlan from killing him. Maybe Li Tianlan would kill him as the new god of war of Zhongzhou state. At that time, Gu Xingyun would also have to fight desperately. It was indeed very tempting to break through to the peak of the invincible realm. But when there was no other choice, both his life and the future of Kunlun City were more important than the realm of martial arts. Here. Me. Die. With a cold and furious roar, Gu Xingyun stretched out his hand and pulled fiercely in the void. He released the 9 secluded impasse within the absolute domain and the 10 absolute domains within the 9 secluded impasse. This was the 3rd domain. Kunlun City also practiced swordsmanship, but it took the path of using swords to form a formation. In the final analysis, the so-called formation was a domain. The biggest trump card of a domain-type invincible realm expert was naturally the domain. 100 meters around them formed a void. Within the void, almost all the masters below the invincible realm had no room to resist. In the battle of the same realm, compared with all kinds of sword energy, their fighting methods were simple but extremely terrifying, commonly known as matryoshka. They used their own strength to constantly form new domains, and then completely distorted and detonated the domains, thus forming an incredible group destructive power. Before their physical strength was exhausted, the layers of domains were almost endless. Gu Xingyun, who was completely crazy, did not care about anything. In the domain that was similar to the void environment, the storm kept howling and twisting. Layer after layer of domains exploded without reservation. The huge impact pushed Li Tianlan's body back constantly. In a short time, his body was pushed back hundreds of meters by the strong impact wave. In Gu Xingyun's sight, Li Tianlan's body seemed to be covered with countless red spots in an instant. That was blood. Gu Xingyun strode forward, and the space within a radius of hundreds of meters was enveloped by his domain. Li Tianlan seemed to become the center of the domain. Layers of twisting and shrinking domains squeezed toward him endlessly. His body lost balance and swayed left and right under the powerful impact. Li Tianlan seemed to have completely lost his patience. Gu Xingyun's state was very stable. That meant that his goal had been achieved. In this case, Li Tianlan smiled. He still wouldn't kill Gu Xingyun. But the current situation was that Gu Xingyun wanted to kill him. In the silent but violent storm, he raised his palm. In an instant, the black trench coat on his body seemed to have lost all its support and danced wildly. Only the raised sleeve was stable and fierce. At this moment, the raised arm was like the sharpest divine sword. Gu Xingyun rushed over desperately. Several domains formed around him at the same time. Li Tianlan's palm stood up. He stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and chopped down. It was simple, without any superfluous movements. But at this moment, as Li Tianlan's figure moved forward, this simple movement carried an indescribable overbearingness. In the constantly twisting domain, a stream of sword energy appeared silently and extended from Li Tianlan's palm. At this moment, Li Tianlan's palm seemed to extend countless times. Gu Xingyun's chest suddenly became stuffy, and he could not breathe smoothly. He raised his head in disbelief and looked at Li Tianlan's palm. The stream of sword energy took shape in an instant and stretched out, piercing through layers of domains without any pause. This was a sword move that Gu Xingyun was very familiar with. But it was also the most terrifying sword move he had ever seen with his own eyes. The Li family's sword 22, Break of the Sky. This was the Li family's absolute sword. In the past many years, he had seen Li Honghe use it, Li Guangtu use it, Li Shi use it, and Summer Solstice use it. He had seen the sword 22 many times. But he had never seen such a terrifying break of the sky. This sword move gave him the feeling that it was not Li Tianlan who was using it at all. Instead, Li Tianlan had become the sword 22 itself, a sword. So although there was no sword in his hand, he took a step forward and smashed heaven and earth in an instant. The layers of domains were directly pierced through by the peerless sharpness. In the dark domain, endless light surged out like an erupting volcano. Finally, there were other sounds in front of Kunlun City. In the shining light, a black trench coat with the aura of death appeared directly in front of Gu Xingyan. The palm that chopped down was lifted, waved horizontally, and crossed Gu Xingyan's throat. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan turned around and punched. The dragon's roar shook the wind and snow. Dragon Fist, Azure Dragon Cannon. Gu Xingyan, whose throat was completely torn, completely dissipated. That was the domain clone that Gu Xingyan condensed in a hurry after entering the peak of the invincible realm. It was similar to the sword energy clone. But obviously, the time was too short. Without any research in this area, the clone he condensed had no fighting capacity at all. The moment he turned around, the real Gu Xingyan appeared in front of Li Tianlan. Their fists collided fiercely. Li Tianlan's joints shook at the same time, and the incredible power directly crushed in front of Gu Xingyan. Like a small bus sprinting at full speed, it directly crashed into a fully loaded heavy truck. His body was blown away uncontrollably. The moment his feet were in the air, he finally saw Li Tianlan's state clearly. How could it be? Doubts flashed in his heart. Facing the two fists that followed closely, he subconsciously chose to avoid them. At this moment, Li Tianlan in his sight was almost intact. The blood caused by the shattering and explosion of countless layers of domains just now seemed to have completely disappeared. His body retreated quickly. He subconsciously stayed away from Kunlun City and retreated to the towering and lonely Qingyun Peak in front of Kunlun City. The domain formed in front of him again. Li Tianlan's body twisted for a moment. The domain was not broken. But Li Tianlan appeared directly outside the domain and appeared in front of him. Gu Xingyan's heart suddenly sank. He didn't know how he did it at all. Even the real Chosen One could not pass through the solid domain of the peak of the invincible realm silently. The Chosen One might be able to shatter the domain of the peak of the invincible realm by raising his hand. But the domain had been formed, and the other party directly passed through the domain. In less than half a second, Li Tianlan's body seemed to be walking in another world. He got rid of the connection with the real world. It was no longer a question of how to do it. It was impossible. But all this happened in front of him. The domain was ineffective. This also meant that any attack would not have any effect on Li Tianlan. Was it really invincible? Why was it like this? Gu Xingyan had no time to ask. Li Tianlan, who appeared in front of him, had raised his palm again. The starting gesture of Dragon Fist, Flying Dragon in the sky changed instantly. The first move of Killing Sky. Countless messy and entangled sword lights suddenly burst out from Li Tianlan's palm. The majestic sword chi shattered the domain that had not yet been completely formed around Gu Xingyan. The sword chi whistled wantonly in the world of ice and snow, and the snow was flying all over the sky. The messy sword chi rolled over Gu Xingyan's body, bringing with it a lot of blood, and created gullies that were dozens of meters long in the vast snow. Gu Xingyan was completely suppressed at this moment. The reason? It was the unexplainable shuttle. Under normal circumstances, Gu Xingyan was invincible. He was at the peak of the invincible realm. Although he was injured, compared with Li Tianlan, even if Li Tianlan had dual wind and thunder veins, he had a huge advantage in physical strength. Dual wind and thunder veins greatly enhanced Li Tianlan's destructive power, but it also meant a huge consumption of physical strength. When Gu Xingyan was full of physical strength, his domain was endless. It only took 1 second, or even half a second, for him to form a complete domain. It took time for Li Tianlan's sword energy to break the domain. Maybe it only took half a second, but Gu Xingyan could also form a new domain in this time. Li Tianlan was not in the invincible realm. As long as it dragged on, Gu Xingyan could exhaust Li Tianlan's physical strength. This was the simplest and safest way to win. Gu Xingyan had other ways, but this was the safest. But the inexplicable shuttle, which was obviously impossible, directly broke all this. His domain was formed, and Li Tianlan appeared directly in front of him from the domain. There was no time to break the domain, which meant that Gu Xingyan had no time to form a new domain. All this happened in that half a second. The inexplicable shuttle bought half a second. The dragon fist inexplicably turned into the heaven-killing move, and the sword energy completely shattered the domain that had just appeared but not completely formed. Gu Xingyan was completely suppressed. The sword energy and the wind and snow flew wildly. After the heaven-killing move, he stabbed forward with one hand, and the indomitable destruction directly left a blood hole on Gu Xingyan's body. Before the blood gushed out, the majestic and heavy sea-breaking move completely enveloped Gu Xingyan. The rotating eighth blade, sky-burning, flew over like a storm. The sword energy filled the sky, and the raging fire danced with the white snow. Gu Xingyan's body retreated to the foot of Qinyan Peak, and then began to go up without hesitation. His footsteps flew all the way on the snow as if it were flat ground. The ninth blade's dusk. Li Tianlan's soared into the air and stabbed straight, with unparalleled sharpness in his arm. A large amount of snow roared down from Qinyan Peak, covering the sky and the sun, almost forming an avalanche. In the snow curtain that covered the sky, Li Tianlan's arm flew over. The huge snow curtain, like the sky, was torn apart in an instant. His palm broke the wind and snow, and the amazing power turned into the purest sword energy, bringing up an arc of light up to 100 meters long. The extreme sharpness drew a natural arc in the air and directly chopped on the top of Qinyan Peak. There was a loud bang. No! Gu Xingyan's desperate roar suddenly sounded. A sword cut a mountain. Qinyan Peak, which had stood in Kunlun for many years, was directly broken by this sword. The nearly 200-meter-high peak was separated from Qinyan Peak, hanging upside down with endless ice and snow. The wind and snow almost covered Kunlun City, and huge stones fell straight to the gate of Kunlun City. The sword energy in the air broke the domain, and the raging fire brought by sky-burning move was still burning in the heavy snow. It was a scene of heaven and earth collapsing everywhere. Gu Xingyan rushed over like a madman, trying to break the huge stone of hundreds of meters. If this huge stone completely fell on Kunlun City, the huge impact could even directly destroy most of Kunlun City. The huge stone fell. Li Tianlan and Gu Xingyan fell at the same time. Gu Xingyan finally had time to form his complete domain. The domain enveloped the huge stone. The sword energy and the domain exploded at the same time. In the earth-shattering roar, the huge Qinyan Peak broke into countless boulders, sprinkling into the interior of Kunlun City like a destructive rainstorm. Li Tianlan's body tightened for a moment. The next second, a meteor suddenly appeared in the sky where the stones were flying. The boulders were still falling down. The entire world became incomparably silent. In the absolute silence, the meteor rushed directly to Gu Xingyan. All the boulders blocking the way of the meteor turned into powder in an instant. The distance of dozens of meters passed in a flash. The forever silent world. There seemed to be only sword light left between heaven and earth. The seemingly soft sword energy rushed to Gu Xingyan and stabbed him in the chest. Gu Xingyan's body was also falling. In a hurry, he just raised his hand and blocked his heart with his arm, seemingly in a panic. He lowered his head slightly and showed a grim smile. Li Tianlan came to him with the sword energy all over the sky. The sword light touched his arm. Blood splashed. In the severe pain, Gu Xingyan clearly felt that his left arm was empty. An arm suddenly flew out with blood dripping down. At the same time, he waved his right hand forward with a twisted expression. He clenched his right hand tightly, and there was a domain on his arm that had been condensed to the extreme. The domain contained countless sword formations he had learned in his life, and the sword energy was monstrous. The moment the blood splashed, the fist condensed with the power of an expert at the peak of the invincible realm also swung over. Completely, without any reservation, it hit Li Tianlan's heart. Clang! There was a sudden loud noise in the air of Qinyan Peak, which was like the end of the world. Gu Xingyan's voice sounded after the loud noise. The earth-shattering roar and the shouts of the crowd faintly came over. It was like a chaotic sound in a nightmare. She frowned. Half of her face was swollen, and she was awakened by the pain because of this small movement. She raised her hand subconsciously, touched her face, and then opened her eyes. In her sight, there was a vast expanse of snow. A loud chaotic sound came from behind her. She turned her head and saw Kunlun City in the distance, whose gate had been smashed, and Qingyun Peak, whose peak had been cut off by a sword in front of Kunlun City. Ah, she subconsciously let out a low cry, and then found that she was on the back of a man. He carried her on his back and walked forward unhurriedly. Where is this? No, what happened? Who is it? She shook her head fiercely and subconsciously struggled on the man's back. In her sight, she could only see a strange side face that she seemed to have seen before. The man carrying her on his back was silent for a while, and then simply said, "I'm my brother-in-law." This chapter belongs to number 17. Chapter 929. The vast snow was still fluttering in the air, as if it would never change. It was extremely quiet between heaven and earth. He lay quietly on the snow, and the bright red blood soaked the snow under him. The feeling of warmth and coldness kept alternating on his body. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the snowflakes in the sky. He had seen this scene for many years, but at this time, it seemed that he was too tired. He suddenly felt that this scene was a little monotonous. No, it was boring or ugly, he was a little tired of watching it. He laughed at himself and breathed a little louder. The feeling of suffocation was stuck in his throat. His body trembled and he suddenly coughed violently. Blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, thick and red. He kept coughing, and the indescribable pain pulled him out of his dullness and loss. In front of him, nearby, and far away, all kinds of sounds gradually came into his ears. He closed his eyes in pain, and he felt like he was dead inside. He lost. He was utterly defeated. Gu Xingyun had never thought that he would lose so badly. In the short battle, half of Kunlun City was razed to the ground and turned into ruins. The raging fire was burning in the ice and snow, and the air was full of messy and violent sword intent. His opponent had left Kunlun City. No, from today on, there might be no Kunlun City. He tried everything to overthrow the Li family, carefully, patiently, and painstakingly let Kunlun City gain a foothold in Jianghu State and the Dark World. Before he had time to breathe a sigh of relief, the history of Kunlun City was completely over in less than 15 minutes of battle. His toughness, persistence, and madness were meaningless in the face of absolute strength. Gu Xingyun looked at the sky, and his eyes were numb. The excruciating pain spread from all over his body, but the most painful part was his face. The shoe print was clearly imprinted on his face, like the most humiliating mark. He and Li Tianlan fought into Kunlun City from Qingyun Peak and destroyed the city gate. The Welcome Avenue near the city gate became riddled with holes in the shortest time. The nearby 3 blocks were completely smashed under the violent sword energy. Blood was flying and corpses were everywhere. At the end of the battle, the devil-like young figure directly tore apart the 10 Supreme Sword Formation, which had always been regarded as the core of Kunlun City, with unparalleled power. It was a super sword formation that Gu Xingyun personally presided over, supported by 2 superiors of the half-step invincible realm, 3 superiors of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, 7 superiors of the thunder-shocking realm, and hundreds of fire-flaming realm elites of Kunlun City operated together. Awe-inspiring sword light, a majestic domain, and more than 100 densely packed figures. Thunder, fire, thunder, and the void. The final battle was in the central square of Kunlun City. The young figure stood in the center of the sword formation. Raging fire, thunder, void, ice wall, nothing could stop his footsteps. He completely tore apart all the obstacles in front of him in the most violent way, and finally stood in front of Gu Xingyun. In the horrified and confused eyes of countless people in Kunlun City, Li Tianlan stepped on Gu Xingyun's face. The huge force squeezed the muscles of his face and pressed his head into the hard and flat ground. Gu Xingyun's mind was only filled with the other party's emotionless question. How dare such a guy call himself the god of war of Jianghu State? Gu Xingyun laughed again. His whole body trembled, and his blood kept spreading. All kinds of chaotic voices continued in the distance. He knew very well that from this moment on, he really had nothing. The beautiful dream that the whole Gu family had for more than 20 years was shattered by Li Tianlan in the cruelest way. The square that used to be located in the center of Kunlun City had been destroyed. The clean ground, green lawn, and bright winter plum blossoms were all in a mess. With Gu Xingyun as the center, there were corpses everywhere, flowing blood, scattered limbs, and broken swords. It was a scene of purgatory on earth. 10 Supreme Sword Formation was the strongest sword formation in Kunlun City, and it could even be said to be the strongest sword formation in the Dark World. Gu Xingyun at the peak of the Invincible Realm operated by himself. Half-step Invincible Realm, Thundershocking Realm, and hundreds of superiors of the Fire-Flaming Realm operated at the same time. In theory, such a sword formation could resist almost any enemy. At least before today, Kunlun City thought so. But today, 10 Supreme Sword Formation ran for 6 minutes. To be exact, it was 5 minutes and 51 seconds. Li Tianlan forcibly broke the formation. 136 elites of the Fire-Flaming Realm of Kunlun City died in the battle. 2 superiors of the half-step Invincible Realm died in the battle. 3 superiors of the Thundershocking Realm died in the battle. Of the 7 superiors of the Thundershocking Realm, 4 died in the battle, 1 was seriously injured, and 2 escaped. The most ironic thing was that among the superiors of the Thundershocking Realm who escaped, there was Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City who was once known as the future Heavenly Son and had the Heavenly King heart. He was Gu Xingyun's biological son. All the forces of the entire Kunlun City were completely destroyed by Li Tianlan's power. In the 15-minute battle, he completely overturned the central city that had occupied the special warfare system of Jianghu State for more than 20 years. What else did Kunlun City have now? Or, what else could Jianghu State pay attention to Kunlun City now? Presumably, Jianghu State would not need a state-protecting war god whose face had been stepped into the ground. Gu Xingyun was in a trance. He thought of that day many years ago. On that day, the only girl he had ever loved in his life was caught as a small gift to please Li Kuangtu. Yes, it was a small gift, not even a big gift. And on that day, Gu Dongqing, the patriarch of the Gu clan at that time, faced Gu Xingyun who was crazy and simply slapped him to the ground. That year, that day, at that time, Gu Changqing's shoe seemed to step on his face. At that time, he seemed to say something. How can such a guy interfere with the decision of the Gu clan? It seemed to be this sentence. It was really like, that was the beginning of Gu Xingyun. From the beginning, his ending seemed to be doomed. Everything was like reincarnation. More and more blood was on the ground. Gu Xingyun lay silently, motionless, and didn't want to care about anything. I found it. An ecstatic voice came from a distance. I found it. I found it. Father's arm, hurry up, keep up, do you all want to die? I'll kill you. Gu Hanshan's somewhat crazy voice sounded. In the battle, he was the first to withdraw from the battlefield of the 10 Supreme Sword Formation. After the battle, he was also the first to appear beside Gu Xingyun. A team of doctors from Kunlun City rushed over with a stretcher. Some of them carried a medical kit and began to stop Gu Xingyun's bleeding. His injury was so serious that no one dared to let him move easily at this time. The ambulances at the edge of the square drove over. More and more people came. In a trance, a doctor carefully examined his wound and said affirmatively, "Your Highness's arm can be connected. Hurry up." Busy, chaotic, running and moving figures. Gu Xingyun let them deal with the wound in a daze. At a certain moment, his eyes suddenly moved slightly. The doctors stopped the bleeding, carried him to the stretcher, and rushed to the nearby ambulance. In the rapid movement, a figure appeared silently beside him, moving at the same time as the ambulance. Gu Xingyun's eyes condensed for a moment. He suddenly found that he couldn't see the person's appearance no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't even determine the person's figure. He could only be sure that the person was a man. There were extremely obscure and irregular fluctuations all over his body. Like a cluster of starlight or a cloud, He was enveloped in it. This was, Gu Xingyun's heart suddenly beat for a moment. He turned his head and stared at the person, or the cluster of starlight clouds beside the person. This was a domain. Gu Xingyun was very sure of this. But the level of the other party's domain was even more complicated than his boldest design. It was more complicated than his boldest idea. What was his boldest idea? It was to enter the peak of the invincible realm. It was the realm after breaking through the peak of the invincible realm. It was the domain at that level. But now, Gu Xingyun was in a trance for a moment. He suddenly found that the world seemed to have become a little unreal. Where did such a domain and such an expert come from? He blinked and wanted to say something, but he suddenly froze. The stretcher was still moving forward. The mysterious expert who had been following him in silence had already disappeared. It was as if he had never appeared, as if everything he had just seen was an illusion. The stretcher rushed across the square and into the ambulance. The ambulance began to go to the small hospital inside Kunlun City. The starlight cloud had appeared in a small courtyard behind Kunlun City. The doors and windows of the courtyard had been destroyed by a huge force. It seemed that someone had been hit hard not long ago, and his body had broken the doors and windows. It was a mess. The broken doors and windows and scattered glass fragments were everywhere in the living room. Although it was very messy, it could still be seen that the surrounding layout was extremely warm and elegant. His Majesty quietly walked around the living room, pushed the door open, and walked into the bedroom. A faint fragrance lingered in the bedroom. The bedroom, full of girlish atmosphere, was very tidy. The bed, the wardrobe, and everything else had not been moved at all. But the owner of the bedroom had disappeared. Maybe she would never come back. This city, the wind and snow outside the city, everything in the city, everything. It seemed that there was really nothing worth staying for her. He stood in the middle of the bedroom, sniffing the smell in the bedroom, and remained silent for a long time. He stood there motionless, like a frozen statue. It was noon in Kunlun City. The figure, who had stood in the girl's bedroom all morning, finally moved and sighed softly. "I'm a little late." His figure slowly disappeared from the bedroom, like a wisp of breeze, without a trace. In the luxurious ward on the top floor of Kunlun City Hospital, Gu Xingyun was covered with plaster and bandages, lying on the bed stiffly like a mummy. His wound had stopped bleeding, and his arm was temporarily connected. What awaited him next was a long period of recuperation. But what was the point of such rest and recuperation? The air in the ward fluctuated for a moment. Gu Xingyun's eyes moved, and he struggled to shift his gaze. The air in the room fluctuated like water waves. The first ray of light appeared in the fluctuating air. The fine light drifted in the air lightly and casually, outlining a blurry figure. The cloud of starlight gradually became lively. The figure that Gu Xingyun saw on the stretcher stood in front of his window again. Gu Xingyun looked at him and did not speak. He had seen a lot of invincible realm experts. But it was the first time that he had seen a person who could make such a fancy appearance. Gaudy, Gu Xingyun laughed at himself. This kind of thing that he could not understand also meant the other's realm. Obviously, this was an invincible realm expert at the same level as Li Tianlan. In the blurry clouds, the figure walked around the sickbed, as if observing his injuries. Gu Xingyun remained motionless and did not speak. He just let the opponent observe him. Not to mention now, even if he was in his heyday, it would not be difficult for the opponent to kill him with his realm. In this case, the so-called resistance was meaningless. He looked at the other quietly and did not even ask who the other was. "Let me introduce myself." In the cloud, the figure with an extremely vague face seemed to smile. The smile was a little indifferent. "You can call me Your Majesty." He looked at Gu Xingyun and asked slowly, "Is it Li Tianlan or Xianyuan Feng who hurt you like this?" Chapter 930. Gu Xingyun stared at the figure in front of him without blinking. He seemed to be a little slow and behaved like an old man with dementia. His Majesty was not in a hurry and quietly waited for his answer. Time passed bit by bit in the ward. The silence was like a confrontation. His Majesty's aura was always vague and gentle, without killing intent or hostility. Gu Xingyan was sure of this and felt slightly relieved. He closed his eyes and slowly said, "Both." "What do you mean?" His Majesty frowned. "It's Xianyuan Feng, or Wu Qing, or Li Tianlan." Gu Xingyan gritted his teeth. Since he became an expert of the invincible realm, today's short battle could be said to be the biggest shame of his life. He didn't want to recall some details, but when it came to this topic, the scenes kept replaying in his mind. Xianyuan Feng became his shadow. His Majesty looked at Gu Xingyan as if what Gu Xingyan said was nonsense. He had known this for a long time. It was so early that Gu Xingyan couldn't imagine it. "It's the shadow formula, Tribulation's shadow formula." Gu Xingyan's voice was hoarse. Li Tianlan used the shadow formula to connect Xianyuan Feng with him. "Do you know what this means?" His Majesty's mood did not fluctuate. "This means that on the battlefield, within a certain distance, or within the perception range of the sword energy of both sides, he and Wu Qing can change their positions at will." "So, it was not only Wu Qing who just trampled on you, but also Li Tianlan?" Gu Xingyan did not speak. But this was the whole truth. In the process of fighting with Li Tianlan used Dragon Fist. Dragon Fist could be said to be the Li family's most aggressive melee skill. 72 styles of Dragon Fist could be combined at will. It was broad and profound, violent and domineering. It was a very special skill of exerting force. The force was applied to every joint of the body, and then condensed in one place and burst out completely. Wu Qing was a sword, and it could not have the force-exerting skill of Dragon Fist. This also meant that without Gu Xingyan's knowledge, Li Tianlan had silently changed his position with Wu Qing many times. "You're really miserable." His Majesty smiled. "But I didn't lose unjustly. I shouldn't have lost. There's no reason for him to directly shuttle out of my domain." Gu Xingyan suddenly growled. It seemed that his emotion affected his internal injury, and he coughed violently again. "Teleportation?" His Majesty asked and poured a glass of water for Gu Xingyan. Gu Xingyan took the cup with his free hand, struggled to sit on the bed, and talked about the fight in the morning in detail. He did not know why he was saying all this to this strange emperor, but he had bottled up endless grievances in his heart, and he needed a channel to pour it out. Even though Zhang Xian did not know His Majesty, whose cultivation realm was higher than his, the other party was undoubtedly a good listener. Most importantly, he couldn't understand the domain travel that defied common sense. Gu Xingyan felt as if the other party had really entered another parallel world at that moment when he was able to pass through the domain silently without destroying it. "It's not teleportation." His Majesty listened quietly, listening to Gu Xingyan from the beginning to the end, and then slowly opened his mouth. His voice was very slow. After giving a negative answer, he shook his head slightly and muttered to himself, "So troublesome. I'm sure he came out from my domain, you definitely won't." His Majesty interrupted Gu Xingyan. "You're slow. That's the shadow formula." Gu Xingyan only felt a little ridiculous. Of course, he could think of the shadow formula, but how was it possible? Li Tianlan was in my domain at that time. Gu Xingyan said coldly, "Could it be that his shadow symbol formula can silently send his shadow through my domain and appear outside it?" The domain of the invincible realm was a solidified space similar to the void. Without shattering the domain, no matter how powerful a person was, it was impossible to project his shadow outside the domain. Before the teleportation, Gu Xingyan could be sure that it was Li Tianlan himself in the domain, because he used the Dragon Fist at that time. After that brief teleportation, the starting gesture of the Dragon Fist suddenly changed to the 24 moves of sword, which instantly broke the balance. The result of the battle actually appeared at that moment. "Who told you it was Li Tianlan's shadow?" In the lingering starlight clouds, His Majesty's voice was indifferent and without any emotion. But Gu Xingyan clearly felt the other party's seriousness and depression. "That's," His Majesty's voice sounded slowly and depressingly, "the ruthless shadow. Gu Xingyan was stunned. Obviously, if it was Li Tianlan in your domain at that time, then Ruthless must be outside the domain. Above the peak of the invincible realm, you have your domain doppelganger, although it's useless. Li Tianlan also has his own sword energy projection. When Ruthless is charged, he has his own life. The sword energy projection is even simpler for him than for us humans. Li Tianlan's sword intent and sword energy are in perfect harmony with Li Tianlan. It's the kind of harmony that you can't imagine. His sword intent and Ruthless are one. Ruthless can use the 24 moves of sword, so naturally, he can also create the sword energy projection and use the shadow formula to change positions with the shadow. His Majesty's voice was a little cold. Li Tianlan's real body trapped in the domain didn't come out, but at that moment, he created a shadow outside, changed positions with the shadow, and appeared directly in front of you. At that time, you detonated the domain and were forming a new domain. Li Tianlan took advantage of this time to change positions with his own shadow and left the battlefield. He was silent for a while and smiled sarcastically. At that time, he should have entered Kunlun City to find someone. Gu Xingyan was really stunned for a long time this time. It was even a little difficult for him to understand the specific meaning of His Majesty's words. Ruthless, Li Tianlan, shadow, he shook his head fiercely, which affected the wound on his face and made a muffled groan. There's no way to replay the whole process of the battle. During the whole process, you don't even know how many times Li Tianlan's real body appeared. You're right about one thing. In the domain, Li Tianlan can't project his shadow out of the domain, but what if his shadow has always been outside the domain? Don't think about Ruthless' shadow. The current situation is that Ruthless can have a shadow, but Ruthless himself. Because I'm talking about Ruthless, not Xianyuan Feng without energy. Ruthless in this state, as you said yourself, is Li Tianlan's shadow. Even in your domain, he can change positions with Ruthless. The domain you detonated may hurt Li Tianlan, but how can it hurt Ruthless, who is combined with several murderous weapons? Li Tianlan's shadow, Ruthless' shadow, the shadow of the shadow. Gu Xingyan had a splitting headache. He suddenly thought of something and was shocked. He said hoarsely, if what you said is true, does it prove that Li Tianlan can change positions with the shadow made by Ruthless? His Majesty looked at him and said in a deep voice, of course, where Ruthless' sword energy can reach and Li Tianlan's body can bear it, he can appear anywhere and disappear from anywhere. And, many times, we don't even know whether Li Tianlan, who suddenly appears, is his real body, his shadow, or Ruthless. How is this possible? Gu Xingyan muttered to himself, in this case, who else can kill him? Nothing is impossible. His Majesty shook his head. Have you forgotten the desert? When Xianyuan Feng appeared on the battlefield from outside the desert, the front line of the battlefield was at least 60 miles away from the desert prison. The moment Xianyuan Feng killed Gu Qianchuan, Li Tianlan appeared. But such a long distance should be Li Tianlan's limit. I also saw the scene at that time. Li Tianlan stood there and didn't move for a long time. His Majesty thought and whispered, he can cross such a long distance, but he will also temporarily lose the ability to move, which is much more serious than being seriously injured. If that's the case, isn't he invincible? Gu Xingyan said subconsciously. Appearing and disappearing at will in a wide range, Ruthless and fierce even exceeded Li Tianlan's powerful combat capability. The shadows of both sides, different clones, ignored the domain, strange and complicated. In this state, Li Tianlan appeared on the battlefield, completely free to come and go, unscrupulous, and others could not even know whether he was the real body or not. His Majesty looked at Gu Xingyan strangely. Now, isn't he invincible? Gu Xingyan was slightly stunned and didn't know what to say. But there is still a chance. As long as we can lock his real body, launch a sneak attack with all our strength, and kill him with one blow before Li Tianlan can react, His Majesty whispered, this is the only way. He thought of the battlefield of the Wang family of Beihai. He was more and more disappointed with Gu Xingyan. This battle only made one more expert at the peak of the invincible realm among Li Tianlan's defeated opponents. For Gu Xingyun, he was a complete loser. Li Tianlan, ruthless, and several shadows played Gu Xingyun in circles. Under the switching back and forth, Li Tianlan hid his strength, and Xianyuan Feng saved energy, which meant that nothing was tested. His Majesty was still not sure about Li Tianlan's current state and Xianyuan Feng's energy storage. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I don't believe it. Gu Xingyun was silent for a long time, then shook his head subconsciously. It can't be like this. Such a Li Tianlan, such a Li Tianlan. He suddenly couldn't describe how strange and terrible Li Tianlan was like this. Your speculation is not necessarily true. In the end, he could only emphasize his point with a pale face, which looked like self-comfort. I didn't speculate anything. His Majesty pointed to his head and said, what I said is the truth. Gu Xingyun was silent for a long time. His state of mind seemed to begin to change slowly, and finally he reluctantly recovered his normal state. He forced himself to suppress the humiliation and the complicated feelings after the defeat not long ago. You came here just to tell me this? He asked calmly. Before I came, I didn't expect Kunlun City to be in such a miserable situation. His Majesty shook his head and said calmly, after this battle, more than half of the elites of Kunlun City were killed or injured. With you, Kunlun City is not at the end of the road. But in this situation, Kunlun City should not expect to have a chance in Jianghu State. In fact, from today on, Kunlun City has almost become a joke in Jianghu State. Gu family has come to this point. What are your plans? Gu Xingyun's pupils suddenly contracted. He looked at his Majesty in front of him and said word by word in a deep voice, so, this is your purpose? The meaning of his Majesty's words was extremely obvious. In today's battle, he was really trampled on by Li Tianlan. He was the special warfare center, the god of war, and all his honor collapsed because of this huge stain. The Gu family had no way out in Jianghu State. What about leaving Jianghu State? After leaving Jianghu State, Gu Xingyun recovered from his injury. He was still at the peak of the invincible realm, the top combat capability in the dark world. The Gu family still had a large number of talents that could be cultivated. Such a team could also achieve great things as long as they got out of the shadow of Emperor Dong's palace. Gu Xingyun couldn't be the war god of Jianghu State, but he was fully qualified to go to East Island to be a great grandmaster and a guardian of Star State. He could even go to Shadow Throne to be the Shadow Prince, as long as he was willing to express his loyalty to other countries and forces. Most countries would not refuse his surrender. Even if Gu Xingyun didn't turn to any country, after leaving Jianghu State, he could also use his own force to turn the Gu family into a big force in the dark world and work hard to become a super force. In the current era, a person at the peak of the invincible realm could do too many things. From a practical point of view, Gu Xingyun was almost the only superior at the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world. Li Guangtu and Lin Fengting had broken through this realm. Moray didn't enter the peak of the invincible realm either. It seemed that Gu Xingyun was the only one standing in this realm. For such a person, even if he failed, he would not have no way out. I'm just asking casually. It's just a suggestion. You should make plans early. His Majesty smiled indifferently. I'm here today to ask you for someone. Who? Gu Xingyun was extremely sensitive to asking for people. Because Li Tianlan also came to ask for someone, and then he became like this. Li Qingcheng. His Majesty's voice was calm. Gu Xingyun froze for a while, as if he didn't expect that his daughter would be so popular. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, she has been taken away by Li Tianlan now. Don't tell me you don't know. Are you trying to humiliate me? I know this. Since I can't get her, I'll inform you by the way. From today on, Li Qingcheng has nothing to do with Kunlun City or you. I'll ask Li Tianlan for her. Don't have any ideas about Qingcheng in the future, otherwise. His Majesty smiled. Li Tianlan can't kill you now, but it doesn't mean that I don't dare to kill you. Do you understand? Is this a threat? Gu Xingyun's eyes were burning. This is a notice. His Majesty said blandly. Who the hell are you? Gu Xingyan stared at him without blinking and asked seriously. I've introduced myself. His Majesty responded casually, you can call me your Majesty. Gu Xingyan couldn't stand it anymore. He sneered and said sarcastically, you hide your head but show your tail. Do you deserve to be called your Majesty? This sentence was so familiar that His Majesty laughed directly. Oh, you're so weak. Do you deserve to be called the God of War? Gu Xingyan's expression froze for a moment, and then he smiled with some distortion. You're right. His Majesty looked at his distorted face. After a few seconds of silence, he whispered, you're right. Gu Xingyan glanced at him. The smell of gunpowder that had just risen between them seemed to have faded a lot. I'll give you a suggestion. His Majesty turned and walked to the door of the ward. If you can't survive in Jianghu state, you can consider coming to me. You still have time to think about it. After the final battle in Beihai, we'll meet again. Gu Xingyan looked at his back and suddenly said, you said you want to find Li Tianlan for her? His Majesty paused, nodded, and said in a low voice, I have to go. Hearing this and thinking of Li Qingqing, Gu Xingyan felt a little strange. His Majesty's words were with unquestionable determination. Did he have to go? He sighed softly and asked, can you beat him? His Majesty stepped out of the room again and said blandly, I don't know. No one knows the answer to this question. But. He opened the door and said, you'll know after the fight. Chapter 931. Before Li Tianlan returned to Yuzhou, the result of the Battle of Kunlun City had completely spread throughout Jianghu state. First Gu Qianxuan, then Zhu, and then Gu Xingyan. Although Gu Xingyan did not die, no one would think that Li Tianlan did not have the strength to kill him. This battle completely destroyed most of the high-end combat capability of Kunlun City in just over 10 minutes. Everyone who knew the news was stunned. The treason case of the Special Warfare Group was still being investigated in a high-profile manner. Kunlun City was almost completely annihilated. No one could have thought that things would develop so fast. When this result appeared in front of people, everyone was silent for a long time, and then they realized that Kunlun City was finished. Kunlun City might not have disappeared. But when everyone was not mentally prepared, everything that happened suddenly completely meant that Kunlun City was completely declining. Thinking of the treason case of the Special Warfare Group and the heavy loss of Kunlun City, everyone who got the news had extremely complicated feelings. The state-protecting war god, the Special Warfare Center, this time, it was really trampled down from a high place by a person. Huge chaos broke out directly inside the Special Warfare Group when the news was spread. At 9:00 in the morning, the speaker of Ningxi province publicly made some remarks similar to, the innocent are innocent, at the provincial council meeting, expressing his support for the treason case of the Special Warfare Group being investigated. The consequence of this public statement was that the governor of Ningxi directly smashed his cup in the conference room. Ningxi had always been considered the base camp of the Special Warfare Group. When the news came out, Li Tianlan and Li Qingqing had not even left Beijiang. This was just the beginning. In the following hours, important figures of the Special Warfare Group began to express their views that it was important to investigate the treason case, but they also expressed their belief that Gu Xingyan would not commit treason. The black sheep inside Kunlun City should only exist in an individual. It seemed that they were still defending Kunlun City, but as long as one was not a fool, one could see that these people who had firmly opposed the investigation of the treason case had begun to waver. Countless eyes were cast to the Hidden Dragon Sea. Many people wanted to know how the Hidden Dragon Sea would react to this. Li Tianlan left the desert prison for less than a few days, but there was big news almost every day. At the border of Sai City, one sword broke the army. 2 consecutive strikes killed invincible realm experts. East Imperial Palace set up the Hero Stone. Zhongzhou new group was established. He destroyed the entire Kunlun City by himself. Everything had something to do with Li Tianlan. What would the council's attitude be? Especially Chen Fangqing, who was now destined to fight Li Tianlan to the death. What would his attitude be? Chen Fangqing did not respond. In fact, ever since the news of Zhu's death came, he had been unusually quiet. That kind of silence was not disappointment after anger, but an indescribable lifelessness. When the news from Kunlun City came, he just read it and said nothing. Perhaps most people were concerned about the misery of Kunlun City and the destined decline of the Special Warfare Group. However, Chen Fangqing was most concerned about Zhu's death. He was the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today. How high-spirited and domineering he had been in the past few years after his rise. Although he was not at the peak of the invincible realm, there were not many invincible realm experts who could be taken seriously by him. An invincible realm killer was extremely dangerous to anyone. But now, the invincible realm killer, who was looking forward to playing with the princess in Huading, died just like that. Unarmed, a kilometer away, life and death in an instant. It was such a simple punch, but it detonated the whole dark world in an instant. What made Chen Fangqing most ridiculous was that Li Tianlan went to Huading in advance to investigate the environment of the airport. The time of Zhu's death was 6:03 in the evening in Huading. Until the plane took off, a few hours after Zhu's death, there was no sign of Wang Yuetong at Huading or Nanyan Airport. The termination plan completely failed. After paying the lives of several generals, countless elites lurking in Beihai, and the invincible realm killer Zhu's life, what the termination plan brought to Chen Fangqing was his irreconcilable hatred with the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. Other than that, there was nothing. Chen Fangqing's heart was a little numb. He targeted Li Tianlan, Emperor Dong's palace, the Wang family of Beihai, and Wang Xingxiao. He had tried hard, planned, calculated, and used countless resources. But now, it seemed that he was really powerless. It was not until the news from Kunlun City came that Chen Fangqing finally realized that he could do nothing this time. What Li Tianlan defeated was not only Gu Xingyun, but also the 10 Supreme Sword formation of Kunlun City that Gu Xingyun personally presided over. No one could understand why Li Tianlan was so powerful. He was the chosen one, and his sword intent was flawless. Everyone speculated that once Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm, he would have the strength comparable to the peak of the invincible realm in the shortest time. But the problem was that Li Tianlan hadn't entered the invincible realm yet. How did he do it? This answer was very important. But to Chen Fangqing, it seemed to be of no importance. The important thing was that Li Tianlan defeated Gu Xingyun, who was at the peak of the invincible realm, and destroyed the 10th Supreme Sword formation of Kunlun City without becoming an expert of the invincible realm. It didn't matter how he did it, but he could do it, which meant that he had at least the strength at the peak of the invincible realm at this time. He didn't plan to do anything else. Waiting was the only way now. Chen Fangqing only hoped that the mysterious emperor's strength would meet his expectations. He also hoped that Li Guangtu, who had reached an agreement with him, would do his best in the North Sea. He had done everything he could. Now, all he had to do was wait for the outcome of the battle. The winner lived and the loser died. There was no other ending. The winter sun shone into the study through the window. Chen Fangqing, holding a cup of tea, opened the window and let the cold wind pour in. His expression was a little dull, as if he had lost all the negative emotions, leaving only a touch of complexity. It was a feeling that was hard to put into words. Recently, he had put all his attention on the plan of the dark world, so compared to others, he could feel some changes more clearly. It seemed that it had become completely clear, and the steps of the new era had come to him. The whole dark world had become extremely clear. It was a kind of feeling as if he was about to be ruled. He could feel the figure in the outline of the new era. It killed Gu Qianxuan, killed Zhu, and destroyed Kunlun City. The figure seemed to be moving with the new era, toward the peak, toward the throne. It was a huge pressure that made Chen Fangqing almost unable to breathe. He held the teacup and took a sip silently. His figure was a little bleak and stooped. Bang! In the indescribable silence, the door of the study was suddenly pushed open. Chen Fangqing frowned and turned to look at Yuan Lin, who rushed in. Yuan Lin, who had always been respectful and calm, forgot to knock on the door. He almost knocked the door open and rushed in. Chen Fengqing's heart sank slightly. In his sight, Yuan Lin, who had followed him for several years, was sweating and pale at this time. His whole body was trembling slightly, and he was out of his wits. He looked extremely frightened. "What's wrong?" Chen Fengqing put down the teacup, tightened his spirit, and said in a deep voice. Oh. Yuan Lin opened his mouth, and his dry voice made Chen Fengqing feel extremely uncomfortable. He felt a burst of irritation, waved his hand, and said impatiently, "Get to the point." In the end, Yuan Lin did not call him the Prime Minister. He gasped and swallowed hard. His voice sounded like a moan or a cry. Something happened in Beijiang. Before his voice had died away, the urgent ringing of the phone rang like a reminder. Chen Fengqing's heart sank to the bottom. He quickly walked to the desk and grabbed the phone on the desk. On the phone, Li Huaqing's cold voice sounded. He did not use any formal title. "Go to the conference room right now. Hold an emergency board meeting." It happened, as soon as Chen Fengqing opened his mouth, Li Huaqing had already hung up the phone. Chen Fengqing's face darkened in an instant, mixed with a touch of embarrassment. After working together for so many years, it seemed that this was the first time that Li Huaqing showed such undisguised anger in front of him. He froze for 2 seconds, reached out to grab his coat, and walked out of the study. Yuan Lin followed him subconsciously. "What happened in Beijiang?" Chen Fengqing put on his coat and asked quickly. Yuan Lin's face was a little dull and stiff. He murmured, "Something happened in Beijiang. An hour ago, in Beijiang." Putting down the phone, Jiang Shanyu shrugged. Looking at Jiang Shan, who was dealing with documents in the office, he laughed. "Dad, he won't come back for dinner." Jiang Shan raised his head. "Can't he make it?" "No, he still has something to do. He has to go to Yuzhou, and maybe to Tiannan." Jiang Shanyu coughed and said slowly. After resigning from the Snowdance Corps, he was still a general of Zhongzhou State, but he did not hold any specific position. His recuperation time was very long, but there was nothing to keep secret. After leaving Snow Country, he went to Nanhai Province for a while, and then returned to his home in Beijiang. Most of the time, he accompanied his father, Jiang Shan. To Tiannan? Jiang Shan was slightly surprised. What is he going to do in Tiannan? He doesn't have to go to Tiannan. If there's a chance in Yuzhou, but he went a little late and didn't make it. When he arrived, the battle in Kunlun City was over, but the people who should be taken back have to come back anyway. Jiang Shanyu said softly. Ridiculous. Jiang Shan looked angry. What time is it now? Go to Li Tianlan and ask him to come back. Ask him to come back right now. Jiang Shanyu looked at him speechlessly and did not speak. Jiang Shan suddenly understood something and fell silent for a while. Don't worry. It's just a try. It'll be fine. Jiang Shanyu coughed twice again, picked up a disposable cup, and poured himself a glass of water. Xianyuan Feng and Li Tianlan State are still uncertain. These are all variables. In fact, Beihai's preparation is almost done, but Li Tianlan is now. I don't know why, but we always feel a little uneasy. It's good to give it a try. If we can bring Qingqing back this time, it will be the best. If not, we might as well take a step back. As long as we know Li Tianlan State, we can design some more targeted plans. Jiang Shanyu held the cup and said slowly, it's hard to kill Li Tianlan now. With Xianyuan Feng in hand, how can he just have a doppelganger? If the final battlefield of the final battle in Beihai is Mount Dibing, then on that battlefield, Li Tianlan can appear in any corner of Mount Dibing at any time and place. His speed is too fast, plus Xianyuan Feng and the Shadow Formula. Although we have many Invincible Realm experts, with his speed, he can even collide with every one of our Invincible Realm experts within a second, which almost means that every Invincible Realm expert has to face Li Tianlan. There are too many variables. So, Jiang Shan's face was solemn. It's necessary to determine his state. If we let him go, except for him and Li Kuangtu, all the invincible realm experts don't even have the ability to protect themselves. The only way is to have a relatively clear grasp of his state, and then find a way to lock his real body so that he and Li Kuangtu can attack at the same time. Jiang Shanyu shook his head. There is only one chance, and it will disappear in a flash. We must test it in advance. He put down the cup, looked at Jiang Shan, and said with a smile, so. I will also go to Tiannan in the near future. Of course, I won't attack. Yes. Do you have to do this? Jiang Shan was silent for a long time, and then he said in a low voice, you should know that I'm not very interested in the so-called heavenly son, and I don't have much ambition for the hegemony of the family. You are my son, and I only hope that you can be safe. The Jiang family has developed to the present, and it's enough. Why do you have to compete with Li Tianlan? Does it make sense? Jiang Shanyu quietly looked at his haggard father. There was some guilt in his eyes, but there was also a touch of determination. The man who raised him, the man who was silent most of the time but bore everything for him, the man who didn't know many things but supported him without reservation. The man who was treacherous, indifferent, shrewd, rebellious, selfish, and hated by many people in the eyes of outsiders, the man who was willing to dig out his heart with a knife to protect his son and died without regret. But he was also the man Jiang Shanyu admired the most, and the only family he had. Did he have to fight? How could he not fight? Jiang Shanyu's eyes flashed for a moment, with a kind of inexplicable light. You know the answer. He whispered, Dad, he told you, right? Jiang Shan didn't speak. After this, you don't have to be so tired. Jiang Shanyu whispered, only when Li Tianlan is dead can we have the right to fight or not. After a pause, he finally said, I've asked Yang Shaoqing to take action. Today, right now. The arrangement in Beihai is almost done. We have been waiting for Beijiang. After the matter in Beijiang is solved, it will be the decisive battle in Beihai. Today? Jiang Shan's body suddenly shook. Jiang Shanyu didn't speak. A few seconds later, the door of the speaker's office suddenly opened, and Jiang Shan's calm and majestic voice suddenly sounded. Prepare the car, go to the Beijiang core. Gunshots. Gunshots were everywhere. Blood, crying, screaming, begging for mercy, and cursing kept echoing. The encampment of the Beijiang core was already in chaos. Half an hour ago, when a group of family members of those who died in the desert war came to the core encampment again to ask for an explanation but were refused entry, the crowd here had become agitated. It was no secret in the core that the core's pension could not be issued for a long time. In the face of the family members who intended to force their way into the encampment, a guard with a gun pushed down a young pregnant woman. His answer was like a flame that completely ignited everyone's inner anger. Pension? No. If the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State doesn't issue it, what can we do? If anyone dares to make trouble, I'll arrest you all. You want pension? Go to jail. The guards were overwhelmed by the completely angry family members. When the other guards were ordered to shoot as a deterrent, there was no room for redemption. It was Huang Tong who gave the order to shoot. The first bullet of the encampment guard hit the back of a family member. Blood flowed out. All the family members rushed into the encampment like crazy under great emotions. Gunshots rang out. The injured family member fell down. The chaos was completely out of control. Countless soldiers rushed out and looked at the family members who fell on the ground. All of their eyes were completely red. Huang Tong. I'll *CK your mother. When a young company commander cursed, some soldiers had already begun to pick up their weapons and shoot. Not at the family members. Instead, they aimed at the guards who shot at the family members. The twisted faces of those desperate family members were almost imprinted in everyone's heart. Almost every soldier had such an idea. If they were the ones who died on the battlefield one day, would their family members also receive the same treatment? They were crazy. The great anger made the soldiers completely lose their minds. The bullets flew directly toward the guards. In an instant, there was extreme contradiction among the soldiers. Some were carrying out Huang Tong's orders, and some were protecting the family members. The tragic killing broke out directly before anyone could react. The order of the entire encampment completely collapsed in an instant. No one knew what it was. However, the worst incident in the past 100 years completely broke out when no one was mentally prepared. In the 15th minute of the chaos, the top officials in the encampment began to report the situation to the army headquarters. Dongxing Wudi conveyed the situation to Li Huaqing at once. But everything was already irreversible. The car rushed all the way out of the Beijiang Council compound. Jiang Shangyu sat in the passenger seat, looking at the scenery outside the window with no expression on his face. The phone rang. Jiang Shan, with a serious face, took out his mobile phone, narrowed his eyes, and answered the phone. President. Yes, I already know. I just received the phone report, and I'm on my way. King bastard. Huang Tong is so confused that he ordered to shoot at the family members. Yes, I understand. I'll do my best to deal with the aftermath. Okay, thank you for your trust in me. After a brief exchange on the phone, Jiang Shan put down the phone with a solemn face. Dad, what did Li Huaqing say? Jiang Shangyu asked. Jiang Shan hesitated for a second, took a deep breath, and said in a complicated tone, the president gave me full authorization on behalf of the parliament. Before the army headquarters, the parliament, and the cabinet arrive, I have full authority to deal with this emergency. Before the people of the 3 highest departments arrive. Full authority. Jiang Shangyu showed a sneer and whispered, it seems that the parliament still doesn't trust us enough. Jiang Shan did not speak. Jiang Shangyu looked out of the window and muttered to himself, in this case, we have to hurry. Chapter 932. Li Tianlan failed to send Li Qingqing to Li Shi in person. As soon as the two of them entered the sanatorium, a tall and burly middle-aged man with a rough appearance rushed over. He seemed to have been waiting at the door of the sanatorium. When he saw Li Tianlan, without saying a word, he directly grabbed Li Tianlan's arm and dragged him in the direction of the nearby helicopter. The rotor of the helicopter had begun to whistle, and it was ready to take off in the shortest time. His face was covered with a thick beard, and he had a rough and somewhat ferocious appearance. His tall and fat body trembled slightly as he pulled the rope stiffly. Li Qingqing, who was a little confused, subconsciously grabbed Li Tianlan's arm and frowned slightly. Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Now there were not many people in Zhongzhou state who dared to treat him like this. But to this man, he couldn't get angry. Dongqing Rushi and Dongqing Chuchi's godfather. Thunder God. Thunder God of the Dongqing clan. Thunder God, who accompanied him in the desert prison for a year. Since he was a child, Thunder God was the first outsider who had nothing to do with the Li family's camp that he had ever met. This was a kind of feeling that was difficult for others to understand. Although they only got along for a year, they were very happy. Later, Li Tianlan left the Li family, and they didn't see each other much. But Li Tianlan had always respected and appreciated Thunder God. No, Uncle Thunder, wait a minute. Where are we going? Li Tianlan followed Thunder God's strength helplessly. Hidden Dragon Sea. Thunder God was stunned and said in a deep voice, the parliament has been quarreling. Chen Fangqing and the minister almost fought in the conference room. The meeting is now adjourned. The minister told me to wait here and take you there as soon as you come. Chen Fangqing and Dongqing Wudi almost fought. And in the conference room of Hidden Dragon Sea? So explosive? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. What happened? The situation in Beijiang is very chaotic now. I don't know much about it. Let's talk about it when we get to Hidden Dragon Sea. Thunder God pulled him onto the helicopter. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Li Tianlan turned to look at Li Qingqing and said slowly, Your mother is in Ward 001 on the 3rd floor of the 2nd building. I can't go there now. How about this, you go to her by yourself? There is no one else in the room. You can have a good chat. Li Qingqing was stunned. She bit her lip and looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in her eyes, but she subconsciously let go of his arm. By the way, tell her that we will go to Tiannan as soon as possible. Tiannan has something you need. Li Tianlan said again, and then he was dragged onto the helicopter by Thunder God. The helicopter shook for a moment and slowly lifted off. Li Qingqing stood under the helicopter in a daze. The strong wind brought by the rotors blew her clothes. She stood there silently and raised her swollen face. She looked a little pitiful. Li Tianlan glanced at her and shook his head. The helicopter rushed toward the hidden dragon sea at full speed. In the cabin, Thunder God had calmed down. He looked at Li Qingqing, who was standing still below, and smiled. When he was about to speak, Li Tianlan handed him a cigarette and asked casually, "Why are you in Yuzhou?" "I attended a meeting of the army headquarters. The minister was in a hurry to find you, so he asked me to guard here." Thunder God smiled, took the cigarette, and took a deep breath. Li Tianlan nodded and said yes, with a complicated look in his eyes. He still remembered what Li Shi had told him. That year, more than 20 years ago, when he and Dongqing Rushi were just born, it was Thunder God who rushed in and called him his godson. As a result, he took Dongqing Rushi away. Then there was the current Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan felt a little helpless. Things had come to this, and he had no opinion on Thunder God. He just thought of the past and looked at Thunder God today, and he inevitably felt a little subtle. "Boy, why are you looking at me like this?" Thunder God scratched his big face inexplicably. "I'm guessing when you will be promoted." Li Tianlan laughed. Hey. Thunder God rubbed his hands and said, "Probably soon. The minister means that this year I am very critical. If I operate well, there is still hope. He said that you have also helped me a lot." Li Tianlan smiled and did not speak. Thunder God was one of the real core members of the Dongqing clan. His parents were Dongqing Hanguang's comrades in arms. After they died in the early years, Dongqing Hanguang took Thunder God back to the clan for adoption and adopted him as his son. That year, Thunder God was only 4 years old. For many years, as one of the core members of the clan, Dongqing Hanguang completely raised Thunder God as his own son. If he had not carried the wrong child, he would probably be Li Tianlan's godfather now. For such a person, if possible, the Dongqing clan would push him up in any case. Now Thunder God was the commander of the Blood Battalion, with the rank of lieutenant general. Although there was still a gap between him and the marshal, in recent years, the Blood Battalion had become extremely important because of the relationship with Tiannan. Thunder God, who had complete control of the Blood Battalion, could be said to be the top real power in the Zhongzhou army headquarters. After Jianghu resigned, Dongqing Wudi once again served as the commander of the Border Control Corps, but such a part-time job was destined not to last long. At present, there were 2 candidates for the position of the new commander of the Border Control Corps. One was the old man of the Li family, Eagle King, and the other was Thunder God. Eagle King was originally the only choice, but with a series of changes after Li Tianlan walked out of the desert prison, Thunder God now also had a chance to take the position. The establishment of the new group was destined to leave a large power vacuum in Zhongzhou state. Bai Qingxian joined the new group and took the road of the new group to enter the Zhongzhou parliament, which also meant that the power of the Dongqing clan did not have to worry about Bai Qingxian. This part of the power could completely turn to support Thunder God and let him go further. As for Li Tianlan himself, there was no difference between the Li family and the Dongqing clan. He had never felt that the Li family had treated him badly, let alone that the Dongqing clan had done him wrong. No matter who became the new commander of the Border Control Corps, Eagle King or Thunder God, Li Tianlan had no opinion. However, from the perspective of working together, if Thunder God, who had been with Dongqing Wudi for a long time and was more familiar with the Border Control Corps, could take the position, it would undoubtedly be the best result. I can't guarantee anything now. The situation is too chaotic, and the result is not clear. Let's wait. When the matter in Beihai is over, it can almost be settled. Li Tianlan said softly. Thunder God nodded knowingly. The helicopter landed on the tarmac near the conference room in the hidden Dragon Sea in the shortest time possible. Thunder God did not go down. Li Tianlan walked alone in the direction of the conference room. The adjournment in the conference room continued. The content of this meeting was extremely sensitive. There were no secretaries or staff inside or outside the conference room. In front of the fish pond at the door of the conference room, several directors were standing there, but they did not speak to each other. They were staring at the fish pond in a daze. Li Tianlan glanced around and did not see Li Huaqing, Chen Fangqing, or Dongqing Wudi. Seeing Li Tianlan appear, everyone's eyes fell on him at once. Zhou Yunhai, the leader of the North Group, who was closest to him, came over with a smile and shook hands with Li Tianlan. When did your Majesty arrive in Yuzhou? Just arrived. Before I could take a breath, I was pulled here. Li Tianlan's hands slightly tightened, and his tone was easygoing. You've had a hard journey. Zhou Yunhai patted Li Tianlan's palm. Let's go. Let's have a chat with Senior Zhou. Everyone who saw this scene had mixed feelings. Especially the directors of the academics and the Southeast Group. Although the North Group was still the North Group, everyone knew that with the exposure of the military counselor's identity, the North Group was now almost a part of the new group. Although Zhou Yunhai was still the leader of the North Group, his heir was already the backbone of the new group. Such cooperation was completely the integration of the two forces, and it was so stable that no one could see any hope of destruction. Zhou Mulan, another leader of the giant group, was feeding the fish in front of the fish pond. There was only a little fish food left in his hand. The old man moved slowly, as if he could stand like this until it was dark. Senior Zhou. Li Tianlan's voice was full of respect. Every time I see you, I feel old. This feeling has become more and more obvious recently. Zhou Mulan turned around with a smile and looked at Li Tianlan. His voice was a little emotional. Li Tianlan did not know how to answer, so he just smiled. Zhou Mulan was the oldest among the 9 directors. He had passed the age of 70 and was bound to retire after this term. But he was not unwilling. His only son, Zhou Yuanshan, was developing very well in Jianghu. According to the current momentum, the whole Zhongzhou state would be Li Tianlan and Zhou Yuanshan's world in more than 10 years, unless there was a big accident, such as Li Tianlan's sudden death. Zhou Mulan's face was glowing. He looked at Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "What do you think of this?" "In fact, I still don't know what happened." Li Tianlan smiled bitterly. He only knew that there was a big problem in Beijiang, but it should not be too serious. Otherwise, this meeting must be a race against time. How could there be an adjournment? His mobile phone had run out of power, and Emperor Dong's palace could not contact him. At present, he was completely in a state of confusion. Zhou Mulan was stunned. "Speaking of which, this matter still has something to do with you, Your Majesty." Zhou Yunhai smiled and said softly, "This is the follow-up of the Desert War in Beijiang." The Beijiang army had a big problem. At first, the Beijiang army took the initiative to provoke the Desert War, but the report to the army headquarters was that they were going to conduct a military exercise in the desert. Now the Desert War is over, but there were too many dead. The army headquarters could not take a stand for these dead. After all, this war was not necessary at all. Zhongzhou state could not give all the dead the status of martyrs, nor could it give them the pension they deserved. So the only thing Minister Dongqing did was to approve the request of the Beijiang army for the exercise. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. Of course, he knew about this. It was his request not to give the dead of the Beijiang army the name of martyrs. This also meant that the families of all the dead could not enjoy any of the benefits they deserved after their family members died in the war. This alone was enough to push Huang Tong to a dead end, and then tear a huge wound on Huang Tong that could make the prince group bleed. As for the pension, it was a matter for them to deal with. No matter how he looked at it, the army headquarters had no reason to pay this pension. This was the pension for tens of thousands of people. Jianghu state was not stingy with the pension for soldiers. Under normal circumstances, the family of a soldier who died in the war would receive millions of dollars. But the number of dead in the Desert War reached tens of thousands. This pension was so large that it was totally unimaginable. It was hundreds of billions of Jianghu state dollars. That was hundreds of billions of Jianghu state dollars. From beginning to end, the report of the Beijiang army to the army headquarters was just a military exercise. What the hell did they do to ask for hundreds of billions of pension? The exercise was actually a war. The Beijiang army provoked the war privately. How could they have the face to ask for hundreds of billions of pension? If this pension was paid, it was tantamount to setting an extremely bad precedent. Without reason, without explanation, and without listening to orders, the money was given out. Did they really think that the finance of Jianghu state was someone's private vault? As for the Beijiang army, Huang Tong could not afford this money at all, not even 1/10 of it. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and asked, Then, just a few hours ago, a large number of family members rushed into the largest station of the Beijiang army to ask for an explanation. Zhou Yunhai laughed. His smile was full of solemnity. I don't know what Huang Tong was thinking. Not only did he not come forward to explain and stabilize the situation, but he ordered the garrison to shoot and hurt some of the family members of the dead. Li Tianlan's body suddenly shook. He raised his head in shock and said in disbelief, Shoot. That's the problem. Zhou Yunhai nodded with a solemn face. The injury of several family members caused very serious consequences. The news spread very fast. Now there are tens of thousands of family members in Beijiang, and now all of them are rushing to the station of the Beijiang army to fight the garrison. They are more than 100,000 civilians, and they are the family members of the soldiers. Some of Huang Tong's loyal soldiers in the Beijiang army carried out the order to shoot, but a large number of ordinary soldiers were also enraged by Huang Tong. They took off their uniforms and took up guns to protect the family members of their fallen comrades. Under such circumstances, although there are many family members, Huang Tong's troops have occupied the arsenal of the military region. It has been nearly an hour since the incident happened. No one knows how many people have died in Beijiang. The minister is also in a difficult position. Li Tianlan's face was livid. After a long time, he squeezed out a word from between his teeth. F***ck. No matter how this matter was handled, there would be unimaginable consequences. It was very simple. This was originally a matter of paying or not paying. Pay? The Beijiang army could not afford it, and the finance and army headquarters of Jianghu state had no reason to pay. Once this precedent was set, a large number of military expenses of Jianghu state would be used for some messy things in the future. Not paying? Those family members were bound to start fighting desperately. This problem had already been placed in front of the parliament. But now with the sound of gunfire in Beijiang, the whole thing was completely in a desperate situation. In any case, Huang Tong's order to shoot was incomprehensible. In any case, this matter had to be completely controlled. If those family members were killed by Huang Tong without a reasonable result, which soldier in Jianghu state would dare to fight for Jianghu state in the future? No. It was no exaggeration at all. Not a single one. Not a single one. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. When he was about to say something, a voice suddenly sounded. Tianlan. Li Tianlan turned his head subconsciously. In front of the conference room, Dongqing Wudi appeared with a livid face. Seeing Li Tianlan, his face eased for a moment, and he nodded. Come in with me. We need to discuss something. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.